Steve Irwin spent his life protecting his daughter from everything: snakes, crocodiles, cameras, headlines. But 20 years after his death, there's one thing he couldn't protect her from. And now, it's the one thing that finally broke the family in public. Terri couldn't finish her sentence. Robert turned away from the camera. And the truth Bindi has been quietly carrying? It connects back to something Steve warned about the night before he died. So what really happened? It all came to a head on a warm night in early May 2026, inside the glittering ballroom of the Bellagio in Las Vegas. The third annual Steve Irwin Gala was in full swing. The room was packed. Conservationists, celebrities, supporters, everyone gathered to celebrate Steve's legacy. The space had been transformed into a slice of the Australian outback. Khaki colours, wildlife ambassadors, laughter filling the air. But before the night even began, something felt off. One chair at the family table sat empty, and people noticed immediately. Where was Bindi? When Terri and Robert walked the carpet, reporters didn't hold back. Everyone asked the same question. Terri smiled, calm but tired, and said Bindi was doing better. But travel? That had become difficult. She promised Bindi would be there next year. Then she added something that stopped people in their tracks. She said it was actually easier for Bindi to stay home and feed crocodiles than travel to Vegas. That sounds unbelievable, right? But why would feeding crocodiles be easier than boarding a plane? To understand that, you have to understand what feeding crocodiles really means. At Australia Zoo, it's not a casual task. It's a full-on performance in the Crocoseum, a massive arena built by Steve himself. Thousands of people watching. Massive saltwater crocodiles just feet away. So imagine this: Bindi would rather do that than sit on a plane. What does that tell you about what she's dealing with? Robert stepped in, trying to balance the moment. He explained that someone had to stay back and manage the zoo. It's a huge operation. Hundreds of staff. Massive land. And Bindi was holding everything together. He smiled when he said it. But there was something behind that smile. Something unspoken. Because the truth is, Bindi has been fighting something for years. And most people had no idea. Her battle didn't start recently. It goes back more than a decade. In 2023, she finally shared the truth. She had been dealing with endometriosis. Years of pain. Misdiagnosis. Tests that led nowhere. Her first major surgery removed dozens of lesions and a serious cyst. It sounded like progress. But here's the thing about this condition: it doesn't just go away. And just when it seemed like she was healing, everything came crashing down again. But how bad did it get? In 2025, on the very night of the second gala, Bindi was supposed to be there in Vegas, dressed up, smiling beside her family. But instead, she ended up in emergency surgery. Her appendix had to be removed immediately. Doctors didn't give her a choice. She flew straight to New York. And what they found during surgery? It shocked even her supporters. More lesions. More damage. A hernia from childbirth that needed repair. By the end of it all, over 50 endometriosis lesions had been removed from her body. Think about that for a second. 51. Along with an appendix, a cyst, a hernia. And yet, just hours after surgery, she filmed a message from her hospital bed. Smiling. Reassuring everyone. But how much was she holding back? By August 2025, she finally shared some good news. She said she could live normally again. No constant pain. No feeling like she would pass out. She said she was starting to feel like herself again. And that's the recovery Terri was protecting when she chose to leave Bindi at home in 2026. But even then, something felt fragile. Like one wrong move could undo everything. So the question is, how close is she to truly being okay? Back on the red carpet, the mood shifted. The conversation turned lighter. Robert joked about convincing his mom to join Dancing with the Stars. Terri played along, teasing a 5 to 7 business days response. Everyone laughed. It felt like a break from the heaviness. But behind that joke, there was a deeper story. One that started months earlier, on a dance floor. During the 2025 season of Dancing with the Stars, Robert had a moment that changed everything. On dedication night, he chose to honor his mother. And when he tried to talk about her, he couldn't hold it together. He spoke about losing his father at just 2 years old. About how his mom carried everything after that. The grief, the responsibility, the legacy. And then he danced. But what happened next left the entire room in tears. Terri joined him on stage. They danced together. And at the end, he collapsed into her arms. The judges were emotional. The audience was silent. It wasn't just a performance. It was years of pain, love, and gratitude poured into a single moment. But that wasn't even the most powerful part of his journey. Weeks later, he performed a routine inspired by Bindi's own tribute to their father years earlier. This time, Bindi herself walked onto the floor at the end. The three of them stood together. And then images of Steve filled the room. Robert broke down completely, dropped to his knees. Overcome. The judges gave a perfect score. But honestly, the score didn't matter. Because what people saw in that moment, it was something deeper. Something real. But could he carry that emotion all the way to the finale? By the time the finale arrived, Robert was barely holding on physically. He had a rib injury. Every breath hurt. Rehearsals were intense. But he pushed through. 3 performances in one night. Flawless execution. And when they announced his name as the winner, everything changed again. He became the youngest male champion in the show's history. And together with Bindi, they became the first siblings ever to both win the Mirrorball trophy. But even in that victory, there was still something missing. Someone missing. Back at the gala in Vegas, reporters asked the question everyone always wonders. What would Steve think of all this? Terri smiled and said he'd be amazed they were in Vegas at all. But Robert's answer hit deeper. He said people still come up to him every day, sharing how his father changed their lives. 20 years later, and the impact hasn't faded. If anything, it's grown stronger. But what does that say about the family carrying that legacy? Terri admitted the journey hasn't been easy. There's been grief. A lot of it. But also moments of joy. Moments that kept them going. And now, there's another moment approaching. One that could reopen everything. In September, it will mark 20 years since Steve Irwin's death. 2 decades. And the weight of that anniversary is already being felt. Robert spoke about it earlier this year. He said he feels closest to his father out in the wild. In those quiet moments. When something just feels like him. He even shared a story about catching a crocodile that had once been tagged by his father. Imagine that. Out in the middle of nowhere, and finding a direct connection to him. Coincidence? Or something more? He also opened up about how grief feels different for him and Bindi. For her, it's sharp. Like a stab. Because she had more time with their dad. For him, it's heavier. Like something that never lifts. A constant weight. And when you hear that, you start to understand why the family protects each other the way they do. Especially now. So when Terri stood on that carpet and said travel was too much for Bindi, it wasn't just a casual comment. It was a glimpse into everything they've been carrying behind the scenes. The recovery. The fear of setbacks. The quiet strength it takes just to keep going. And maybe that's the real story here. Not the gala. Not the headlines. But the resilience behind it all. And now the question lingers. Will Bindi fully recover? Will Terri finally step onto that dance floor? And when that anniversary arrives, how will the family face it this time?